lost my cell phone. Shirley, do you have it?
No, I'll look though.
It was over there. You know it's Bob Anderson, right?
Colors. Attention. Gary, colors.
Wait. Okay. I'll start. Good afternoon. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the school board meeting this Tuesday, August 21st, 2018. If you wish to speak during the hearing of citizens, please pick up a card in the back of the chambers, print your name and topic clearly, and return the card to our board assistant, Kathy Tompkins. At the appropriate time, I will call you up to speak. Next up is a flag salute. Riverview High School Color Guard under the direction of retired Sergeant Major Roger Mitchell. Please stand.
Forward. March. Right side. March. Colors. Halt. Post. Present. Arms.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Arms. Forward. March.
Thank you, Riverview Color Guard, excuse me. Next I'd like to introduce our student representative, Alex Hilton from Riverview High School. Welcome, Alex. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi.
Very good. You're on.
My name's Alex Hilton. I'm a senior at Riverview High School in the IB program. Oh, okay. Next year, I plan to play beach volleyball at Florida State University.
Woohoo!
And go Knowles.
Yeah.
I really don't have anything else.
And you're excited to be here. Well, thank you for joining us. And I know earlier I had presented you with a certificate of appreciation. So we wish you the best of luck. And again, thank you for joining us today. Next up, we have a special presentation. So I'd like to invite Mr. James Slayton to the podium to start the Riverview High School presentations.
Thank you, Board. Dr. Bowden, this is a great opportunity to recognize our student athletes. So every season, after every season, we award academic state championships. FHSA does that. And it's a pretty big award, so it's a non-weighted GPA. So if you have AP classes, honors classes, those things, it doesn't count in. So it's a tough one to win. And this year we had actually 3 teams in our district in Sarasota County that won academic state championships. And all 3 of those, I guess it's the Riverview Day, but all 3 of those were from Riverview High School. So pretty amazing. We've had a lot of big success this year with 6 individual state championships. We've had 3 team state championships, and we've had 3 academic state championships. And probably most people would think that the toughest one to win is on the field or the court, but this academic one is very, very rare. And for us to have 3 in the same year, this past school year, is pretty amazing. And for the fact that all 3 were from Riverview is even more amazing. The ones that we're going to recognize today are boys track, who had an unweighted cumulative GPA of 3.6 out of 4. And then our boys weightlifting team from Riverview had an unweighted cumulative GPA of 3.7. So pretty amazing. I think that probably deserves a pretty big round of applause. for me as an athletic director, it's an awesome way to represent what we do. And for us in athletics, we always say that it's about teaching those life principles, and this is not a better example. Past high school, most of these students will not be athletes anymore, but hopefully all of them are going to go on to be successful in whatever they do. It sounds like most of them are going to be going on to college and doing big things, so that's very exciting that in our county it's not just about athletics, even though we're pretty darn good, but it's also about academics. I want to also thank Riverview Principal Aaron Del Castillo, Assistant Principal over Athletics Brian Dorn, and Athletic Director Rod Dragish for all their support. And at this time, Rod, if you would come up, say a word.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the board. I'd like to thank Dr. Bowden, and I'd like to thank our new principal, amazing new principal, Aaron Del Castillo, and Brian Dorn, APA. Our boys weightlifting team is led by Coach Josh Smithers. Josh Smithers had a great season. We had a kid, Jared Moose Griffiths, who came in second, came runner-up in the state championship in heavyweights. And the third place guy was right behind him by 80 pounds. So he did an amazing job. And we call him Moose. He's actually going to be playing next week in the Dallas Cowboys Stadium for the University of Miami against LSU Tigers. So he went on to do great things. Also, our track coach, Bernard Ziegler. Bernard is a fixture at Riverview High School. Bernard has been at Riverview since graduate. I'm not going to tell him how long he's been there, but he's been at Riverview for quite some time. And this is his first year taking over as the head track coach, and he's done an amazing job for our kids. I would like to get Coach Smithers and the team and Bernard Ziegler up, please.
Thank you very much. Real quick, I just want to explain kind of how the weightlifting team works. I'm very proud of this award, and I'm very proud of our athletes. They show up at 2:30. All these guys also play football, so they show up at 2:30. They work really hard for an hour in the weight room with our strength coach, and then these guys would stay an extra 30 to 45 minutes to put in some extra time working some of the lifts and techniques that weren't worked on that previous hour, which isn't an easy thing to do because they're putting in extra time. But the two lifts that we do are the clean and jerk, which is an Olympic-style lift, and the bench press. And so for those guys to be able to put in the extra time, go home a little later than everybody else, and still achieve what they've achieved in the classroom, I think is very impressive, and just want to give them one more round of applause, so thank you. And last thing I want to mention before I call him up is Mr. Dragish was talking about Moose Griffith. Moose had offers from Ivy League schools. He was a football player and a weightlifter, and he chose to go to University of Miami. But it just goes to show what his academic prowess was. So that was a young man that we were extremely proud of. So he's not here; he's at Miami, obviously. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and call the lifters up. First up is Nate Adams. Next is Hayden Richter. Slide down. Next is Roman Althier. Maddie Zeef. Isaac Suarez. Pat Quinn. And I had one young man that couldn't make it. He was on crutches, so he's not here. Is Josh Yak.
Yeah, Josh.
Good afternoon. Okay. Yeah, as I say, this is my first year Riverview High School track coach, but I've been at Riverview High School. Well, I graduated in '85, been coaching there about 20-some years. I coached under the great Jim Anderson, and I took over for his program, which my thing last year was not to mess it up. Okay, he had a great foundation, And like I said, it was just my job is not to mess it up. We also did great things. We also benefit from the football program, which a lot of our guys ran track and did football. We have one young man who's now at the University of Indiana, Jamar Johnson. And, you know, we got a couple of guys that's actually Moose Griffin was also a track guy at the same time. So today, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of numbers, but I had two young men who was nice enough to show up and make me look good. And that would be Daniel Lang and Luke King. All right. I'll also be remiss to say that we had a great volunteer as to help us out, Coach Ken. If you would come up, Coach Ken. Couldn't do it without Coach Ken. You know? But I appreciate us being here. I appreciate the board for having us, and thank you.
Thank you.
If board members, if we come take a picture.
Come on, guys.
You can go stand next to Mr. Ziegler.
Yeah. I would have had that here.
All right, 1, 2.
I think that concludes special presentations. Yes, thank you. Okay, then moving on to superintendent's report.
Yes, we have a number of items under superintendent's report. One of the things that I want to do from this point forward is you will notice that our Sarasota County Schools Police Department has taken over the detail of providing security at our school board meetings, and so we'll be rotating through a number of officers, and so this is a great opportunity for me to introduce to you the officer that's on duty and give the community an opportunity to meet our new police force. On duty this evening is Officer Michael Halpin. Michael? All right, so Mike was born in the Bronx, New York, and graduated from Manhattan College with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communications. Officer Halpin served the citizens of the City of New York as an NYPD officer from 1996 to 2016. He served with the highly elite counterterrorism unit in Manhattan South, where he had the task of planning, staffing, and deploying all resources necessary for the safety of all during the various details, parades, and demonstrations within his borough, to include several presidential visits, as well as the papal visit 2 years ago. The Halpin family relocated to the Venice area in June of 2017. He has hit the ground running. He's been tasked with the responsibility of a special events coordinator, where he has already created operational security plans for all of our football games countywide. I want to welcome Mike to the School District of Sarasota County. We are on day 7 of our new school year. Started school back on the 13th. When we did so, we had 8 new principals in our schools. 3 of those principals had previously served with us in other capacities. Kurt Hutchinson was at Venice High, moving from Atwater. Tomas Denverno went to Venice Middle School from Tuttle Elementary School. And then I think Erin left with her students. But Erin Del Castillo is at Riverview High School, moving from Venice Elementary. New principals include Cynthia Throw at Atwater, Troy Thompson at Lamarck, Jennifer Nzeza at Southside, Patty Felino at Tuttle. 8 new principals opening schools for us on the 13th. We also want to recognize Melanie Ritter at Triad, who took that responsibility. She had the opportunity to come before you. In the area of safety and security, on the 13th, we had an officer at every school in Sarasota County with our municipal partners, to include the Sarasota Sheriff's Department, Sarasota PD, Venice PD, and Northport PD serving in our middle and high schools. At the elementary school level, we had 10 officers on duty from the Sarasota County Schools PD. We had 11 temporary officers assigned on an interim basis from the sheriff's office, and then there is 1 permanent assignment at Venice Elementary and 1 at Booker High School from the sheriff's office. In regards to enrollment, I just want to kind of highlight our enrollment. We take counts throughout the first week, and then on the 5th day is when we make adjustments to staffing. And so our projected enrollment for the 18-19 school year was 43,416 students. On our 5th day, we had in attendance 42,441 students. That broke down to 36,041 in our traditional schools and exactly 6,400 with our charter school partners. Because we fell short of projections, there was a need, as we do every year, to reallocate units, and so there's a process that we go through. And so staff met yesterday afternoon, and based on the 5-day counts, there was a necessity to reallocate units. And so I want to break those down for you. Of our 23 elementary schools, 3 of those elementary schools will be gaining positions. 13 of the elementary schools will be losing positions for a net adjustment of 17 units. At the middle school, we have 2 middle schools gaining units, 2 middle schools losing units for a net loss of 1. At the high school, we saw some growth, so we have 3 high schools that are gaining units, 1 high school that is losing units for a net of 3 units. At our multi-grade schools, of which there are 3, we had 1 gain and 1 loss, but netted out to 0, and we did no unit adjustments at Triad. So a total unit reduction of 15 units based on the 5th day count. Just want to talk to you a little bit about that process. Our principals monitored enrollment throughout the summertime. And so when we say that you're losing units, that doesn't always mean that you're losing a teacher, because our principals are very good at monitoring their numbers. And so we had unfilled positions at a number of these schools. Our rough estimate is there will be 7 or 8 teachers that need to be placed through the staffing process, and we have vacancies for those teachers. And so we may have some teachers who are going to need to move from one school site to another, but we will not have a situation in which we'll have any teachers unassigned or laid off or anything related to that. I'm happy to take any questions that you have on the staffing process. I've provided kind of some detail there for you, but I just wanted to kind of hit it at the 10,000 foot level.
Mr. Robinson?
So last year we didn't get the projections that we had thought, and this year not only we did not get the projections, but we had a decrease in enrollment. Last year we had an increase smaller than projected. So how does this affect your planning going forward?
You'll notice that particularly at the elementary school level, we're not seeing the enrollment that we're projecting. And so you can get down to the individual grade levels, but many of our principals have concerns about the sizes of our kindergarten incoming classes. And so the fact of the matter is it confirms a lot of what you've seen in regards to housing in Sarasota, in regards to, you take my neighborhood as an example. It used to be bustling with kids. Those kids are older. They're in middle and high school, and the families that are moving in typically don't have the younger school-aged kids. And so we've got to refine the projection process so that we're not overstaffing through the summer. But at this point, it's that enrollment that we've got to figure out, because enrollment drives the budget process. We do have an FTE funding system in which we're funded on the direct year. So it's our enrollment for this year. It's not a rolling average. And so we have to make adjustments for decreased enrollment within that year's annual budget.
Could I just have a follow-up question? So this morning we had a robust discussion about high schools and long-range discussions about high schools. And so if the elementary schools are not meeting projection, do you still feel confident about the discussion we had about the high schools that we had during the workshop?
It makes it difficult. I'm not a demographer, but we have kind of a reliance on trying to predict what these future classes look like. When we talk, particularly in West Villages and Lakewood Ranch, they have a vested interest. They are marketing specifically to families. When we had the opportunity to meet with the staff at Lakewood Ranch and talked about their development south of University would look different than some of their development north of it, that they would particularly target school-age families. We believe that also to be the case down in the West Villages. And so we have a lot of dependence on working with those developers and trying to figure out when those new housing units start. But certainly I would consider things to be flat, stagnant now, but we do anticipate future growth because of construction.
This is my last question. Do you think, given this data, that changes any of the recommendations or advice or the direction the board gave at the workshop today?
I do not believe that it does.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown.
What about unfilled positions? Are there still a lot of unfilled positions we've been hearing about? We can't find all the teachers these days.
Sure. And so at the end of the staffing process, by the end of the week this week, I'll have a firm grasp on what our vacancies are. A number of our vacancies were units that the principals never had any intention of filling because you have to back it up with enrollment. So once we've gone through the staffing process, we've deleted all the units. I can get into great detail. But yes, we still have vacancies within the district. It's not a tremendously high number. We still have a number that are pending certification from the state. That seems to be our biggest issue right now. When you look at the number of vacancies we've identified, we've hired for those positions, but because the state has not issued a certificate, they are working as substitutes, and those units appear to be unfilled. But from the student's perspective, their teacher is in their classroom with them. We just haven't transacted them as a full-time teacher because we're waiting on a state certificate.
Okay, Mrs. Zucker.
It's my understanding that the 5-day count is way too early for us to get excited because especially this year, we've started school so early in August. A lot of parents, especially in the elementary school, they're not home back from vacation. So to try and base our budget on the 5-day count is a little off. From all my years of being on the school board, it doesn't work out to the 5-day count.
And we know that. And so the 5-day count, we try to make adjustments to staff as quickly as possible because if you're at an elementary school and we allocate a new unit and you had 5 fifth grade classes and now you have 6, we want to get that teacher on site. We want to get those classes divided back up and so that you know who your teacher is going to be throughout the school year. And so when we do unit allocation at the 5-day count, it's actually pretty sophisticated in that there's nothing magical about the 5th day, and I think that's your point, is that what's magical is what happens in October when we have FTE windows. That's when we submit enrollment to the state. That's when we must conform to class size and the requirements that surround it. But for each school, we have history, and so we know that the 5th day count ends up being 110% or 95% of the October FTE. Last year presented us some problems just confirming those formulas because of the early start, that we didn't know what was it like to come back in August and how many students would be there in October. So this year we have a little more confidence having used our mid-August start date before, but we do factor in the unit allocation process additional growth or loss of students between now and October. But you certainly wouldn't want to wait till October to reallocate units and move teachers.
And the other follow-up is that as it pertains to what we discussed this morning with building a new school, by the time it takes us to get permits, to get a contract, to find a site, to build a school, we'll be up there. and we will need, in my mind, we will have the extra students and need the extra building. So I don't think it changes anything that we discussed this morning.
Agreed.
Thank you. Mrs. Goodwin?
Well, I'm most concerned about staff. Are we able to find these teachers? Do we have enough teachers? Do we have enough substitute teachers? How many of the positions that we have long-term substitutes in them?
And so that's where that point is a little foggy right now, is because if I were to count how many substitutes started the school year, there's a difference between a substitute and a permanent teacher waiting on certification that's working as a substitute. And so by the end of the week, we'll be able to tell you exactly what our vacancies are and how many substitutes are in our school, and I'll get that out to you in a clear and concise way.
Thank you. No, and I think I think the same as Jane. My question is, and I understand the intention is not to create disruption. It's really it's a balancing act. And so just thinking back to circumstances where I've had a family reach out, or even as a mom trying to think about that, when you talk about the 7 to 8 teachers that are moving to allocate, can you kind of talk about what that looks like from the classroom's perspective, as far as if they are getting or there's classrooms that are getting a new teacher, and so can you speak to that?
Sure. So there's a couple different things that happen. If you lose a unit at your school, that means that you had 5 or 6 fifth grade classes, and now you're going to have 4 or 5. And so you have to combine, which means that a teacher is either leaving that grade level or leaving that school, which means there's a classroom that then needs to be scattered over the existing ones. And I can tell you that our principals have varying ways of accomplishing that. The opposite of that is where you go in and there's overcrowding, where you have to take 3 or 4 kids out of every class to create a new class. We have to move portables as part of this process. Is that typically the schools that are gaining units are ones that have seen growth before, and so we actually move portables as part of this process. And that's also a process that our principals are rather sophisticated at doing that. Is you try to do it as blind as possible. You want to make sure that the PTA president doesn't get to pick where their kid's going to be at. And so they each have varying ways of doing that. It's a little more difficult when you move into our middle and high schools, because when you add an English teacher, you're actually adding 6 periods, so the problem is compounded over that. But you also get the benefit of some averaging, and so it looks different at each of our school sites. There's no way around. It is somewhat disruptive. We are glad that our students are bonding with our teachers, and it's difficult to come in and say, because of enrollment, your teacher is leaving this school, and now 3 of you are going to the room next door and 3 of you are going to the room across the hall. That is disruptive, but our principals have dealt with this in previous years.
Thank you. And then just as a follow-up, kind of where Jane was saying, excuse me, Mrs. Goodwin, was speaking to us earlier was, I know we've constantly talked about staffing and such, and so, and long-term subs and all of that. So I know that as you guys calculate that and get that out to us, that's a future discussion that I believe this board will be looking at by way of a workshop as well. So, and from a budget implication, too early to really think about that. I mean, if enrollment's trending down, October is really where we're going to have a sense of recalibrating our budget based on FTE.
Correct, but we can use, the formula is that, it looks like we're about 1,000 students off projection now. By October, that number is 391. So that's actually on the revenue side. And so by offsetting it with the unit reductions, so that will begin to incorporate into the budget. But October is really where the magic happens on an FTE system. October and March are really where we count students and where we're funded.
Okay. Thank you. Was there anything else on the superintendent's report?
That concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the hearing of citizens. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. When the time flashes yellow, 1 minute remains, and you will need to begin to summarize. You must stop speaking when the buzzer rings. Please note that the respect for divergent viewpoints and civility shall be shown at every board meeting. Whether you agree or disagree with the speaker, you should listen politely and respectfully without making any sounds of approval or disapproval, including clapping. First, I have Bob Anderson.
Good afternoon, Board.
My name is Bob Anderson. I am a member of the Joint Management Advisory Board, which is an advisory board created by the school board and the city of Venice to oversee the operation of the Venice Performing Arts Center. There's 4 members on the board: Eric Jackson, principal of Venice High School; Mike Hartley, who is the center manager; Fran Valensik, who has been designated by the city to be the city's representative, and myself representing the performing arts organizations, which would be the Venice Symphony, Venice Concert Band, and Venice Chorale. I would also tell you I am president of the board of directors of the Venice Symphony. I've also been involved in VPAC since the time it was thought of as part of the rebuild of Venice High School. So I'm here today just to give you some additional information. This is your agenda item number 24, and it's some rate schedules. I have no difficulty with the rate schedules that have been submitted to you by facilities staff. I just want to add some more information that I think the board needs to be aware of. Security has been a concern for everybody who is involved in the school board, the school system, and also VPAC. The parties have been discussing security at the Performing Arts Center for over a year. We finally came up with a resolution, and that I had a package of documents that I had passed out to you. The very first page is an excerpt from the minutes of the November 20th, 2017 meeting of the Joint Management Advisory Board. And the highlighted provision just shows you that it was the determination of JMAB that indeed the performing arts organizations should be made exempt from the need to have a security director, security agent contractors, and the Venice Police Department detail. That was the position taken in November of 2017. It was implemented for the 2017-2018 season. There were no incidents that caused us any concern or a need to revisit. Although because of the Parkland tragedy, always we look at security to make sure. And the last meeting of the JMAB was on August 8th. And the next page that you have is part of the agenda materials from that. And I've highlighted it under 1B, that all PAO, which stands for Performing Arts Organizations, are exempt from required security. But if they do employ security, the security contractors must approve by VIPA manager. VIPA is the Venice Institute of the Performing Arts. That's Mike Hartley's 501c3, which operates as your center manager. And it just requires under the use agreement that we advise him of who the security director would be if indeed we engage an outsider. Based on those resolutions and those discussions, indeed rate riders were prepared.
I was going to ask the board if you don't mind suspending the 3-minute rule so he can complete.
For Bob Anderson, anything?
Yeah, go ahead.
The rate riders were prepared and submitted to all 3 performing arts organizations. And I showed you on the next 3 pages, that is just one of the rate riders given to the symphony for the November 2018 concert series. And you'll notice on page 2 that there is no charge to the symphony for indeed the security director, the security agents, or the Venice Police Department detail, because they won't be utilized by the performing arts groups. Just wanted to show you how they've implemented that. None of the performing arts organizations have ever utilized those 3 components as part of the security protocol for their concert performances at VPAC. And then the last page, I provided you with a suggested motion. And I apologize if that's something that's inappropriate, but old habits die hard. And I just wanted to give you an idea that what we're looking for is have no difficulty with the rate schedules that are being brought by facilities, but we would like you to approve the VPAC rate schedule and confirm that the PAOs remain exempt from the charges for security directors, security agent contractors, and the Venice Police Department detail. Just so that if somebody looks later on at those rate schedules and doesn't see the exemption, they'll wonder who's authorized to exempt that. And I just want to let you know that it's worked its way through the process. All the parties are in agreement. They've never been charged to the PAOs, and we just would like confirmation for that when you approve the rate schedules. Thank you very much. I would like to take just a couple of more seconds to thank the school board. The VPAC is an amazing asset for the Venice and South County community, not only for the children, not only for the performing arts organizations, but the community in its entirety. And it's just a great example of how the school board and the municipality can work together to come up with something that amazing. And I thank you for it. I remember working with Shirley Brown back in 2010 on the interlocal agreement to fund it. And then Jane Goodwin and I worked on the use agreement back in 2013. And I just wanted to thank you again for all of that work. It's an amazing facility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Bowden?
Yeah, I would argue that this is the right place for you to land, but I would ask for some time for staff to do some homework with the board attorney just to make sure that we have the right documents in place. Is that we've always respected your ability to independently manage the VPAC, and it is very much different than our other facilities, but there are some liability questions that I just want to make sure that they understand that when they manage events, that they're responsible for those events, and they can make decisions about what the appropriate security is, but that they're accepting that full responsibility. And I believe it may just go beyond a motion. So I want to review the existing contracts and engage with the attorney and bring that back to you at the next meeting, if that's acceptable to you, just to make sure we've got all our I's dotted and T's crossed.
I personally would definitely agree with that. And as from a timing standpoint, I don't know. So just so I'm clear, with that, you're talking about pulling them, then that would impact the item we have on our board tonight. Is that correct? Yes. So we would withdraw until we can sharpen our pencils and review what's been presented.
Well, I believe there is no dispute over the rate structure, and then we could bring additional language back about safety and security. So you could act on this and then reinforce it with an agenda item at our next meeting and the safety security component.
Yes? Yes. Okay.
I will be glad to work with Mr. Hardy, Dr. Bowden, and your staff on any of those issues. They are addressed in the use agreement that was executed by the city and the school board back in November of 2013. But we can certainly revisit them and ask any questions that might be necessary.
Very good.
Be glad to help.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you to the board for suspending rules. Comment on this?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
I just want to say, I'm sure that given your previous life, you don't have any problem about us going to our attorney on this. But I do want to say, that, even though he's the former president of Satoma, I still think that he's a jewel of Venice, and that Bob Anderson is a really good guy. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure seeing you all again.
Thank you again for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Okay. No other additional comments? All right, thank you. So we'll move back on to hearing of citizens. I have Kurt Whitaker.
Good afternoon, board. Thank you for letting me speak. My name's Kurt Whitaker. I live at 613 West Venice Avenue in Venice, Florida. My twin girls attend Student Leadership Academy. They attended Venice Elementary School. They'll attend Venice High School. We enrolled them in Student Leadership Academy because it's in the neighborhood. And I'm here to speak a little bit about a conversation you all had your last board meeting about local millage. And and other parents from some of the charter schools are here. We're just learning about how you all budget. But the one thing we came away with the last 2 weeks is none of us enrolled our kids in SLA or these other charter schools thinking that they're somehow second-class students within Sarasota. Superintendent, the numbers you gave out, they're roughly 15% of the students in this county, and they should not be treated as second-class anything. Now, so I want to make that point first. We've been very pleased. We were astounded by how good Venice Elementary is. From what we've seen at the high school, it's great. SLA has been terrific, and they have, by the way, a new principal in Jonathan Cooley, and he's doing a great job. We spent the summer raising money. We put up security fences. We put in new security doors, put in a new security window. But what we don't get, for example, is we don't get coverage from the Venice police like Venice Middle School does. Why are our kids more exposed and our schools have less capital to be hardened than Venice Middle School? And I can understand the budgeting constraints that you're in, especially in a year when you've got declining enrollment, but don't take it out disproportionately, right, on students that attend charter schools. The other point I'll just make, and it's just my understanding from watching last week, is This has something to do with trying to average from year to year the sharing of the local millage and maybe the PICO funds. And somehow you've come up with some notion that, well, if we average over a number of years, we can go to zero in terms of sharing with charter schools this year. No administrator can run a railroad that way. You can't just sit there at the beginning of the year and say, guess what? We're going to average what we gave you over the last few years, and you get zero this year. New rule, no sharing. Nobody can run a school that way. You wouldn't ask any of your principals at your normal public schools to run that way, and you couldn't run, this board that way. So we're asking just not disproportionate treatment. The charter schools do more with less. They always have, and they always will, and they'll always be a good home for some types of students. They'll be a good example for experimentation. I'm not here to debate the merits of charter schools, but they're here, and we ask you to just treat them not disproportionately. Right? Thank you.
Thank you. I know there's a couple additional cards. Well, 2 more, and happy to make anyone can speak that has their cards. I just, for an update purpose, I don't know if any of the families who are going to speak on charter schools knows that we discussed capital sharing at our workshop this afternoon, which I know that there was discussion on a motion before us. So if I just wanted to be fair to keep you updated. So seeing that, I think this says, I'm sorry, I can't read it, Tommy Witter.
Good afternoon. I'd like to be Tommy Witter for the record, because actually that's my husband. And he sort of jumped on my toes what I was going to say to you, but that's good couple. 34 years together, and we think alike. So I'm here on behalf of Student Leadership Academy, which is a charter school. I was shocked about what you were making a consideration at 3%. I spoke to, via email, Mr. Robinson, Ms. Ziegler, and attempted several times to contact Ms. Ziegler. I believe I was polite. I got responses from you. I thank you. Like I said, we may not always agree, but I appreciate that give and take. That being said, let's start positive right from the beginning, because positive is much better than negative. We do have a new principal. That means it's principal number 9. He was a science teacher, then an assistant principal, and now he is the principal of Student Leadership Academy. For the public, if you don't know, these are not for-profit schools. These are 501c3 status, which is nonprofit. We have the same billable hours as the schools, but we have to do fundraising. We have to find ways to make money. So it's important to understand it isn't extra money coming out of your coffers in that particular way. So we've done some positive things, knowing after Parkland how very serious this was, knowing that it would take a while for the state government to come up with those funds. We had the impetus to contact Sheriff Knight's office. They did an assessment of our school. They told us that we were ahead of many of your public schools. And with that, we have now, on our own, taken out a loan close to $100,000. I think the police will be happy to hear that we have actually hired a armed service security officer. He has a background in the armed services, and he also worked for police departments. He is not the principal. He is not an administrator or a teacher that has taken 143 hours to have a licensed gun. So he is in our school, and he is also helping out the students, and he is doing a great performance and a service for us. We also purchased bulletproof doors and lockout doors. We didn't have those, and nobody offered us the money, because I do feel we're the ugly stepchild. Charters are that way. We were a nursing home. No one offered us the funds. So we went out, got the best deal we could, and we have bulletproof doors. Now, they're not really bulletproof, and every officer will tell you that. It gives us 3 minutes. 3 minutes is enough time for one of the teachers to hit the buzzer to try to save our kids, to try to lock down. We did it without you. And I think you need to know that, because you should be helping us. We're part of your family. We really are. And let's see, have to have the reading glasses. Let's see, so we were assessed by the officer. He's there in our school. We have the bulletproof windows. We have new cameras and speakers and a metal detector wand, all done on our dime. I would urge you to take a look at my card, because we have pictures of what we've done. We've secured our courtyard too. Anyone could have walked in. And so I do have those photos if you'd like to look at them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Christine Pitts.
Thank you for letting me speak to the board. I just wanted to say that, for the record, that 3 o'clock is probably the worst time for you to get feedback from parents. It's pickup time. I have to make special arrangements to be here. But that being said, I have 5 children that have been to Garden Elementary, Venice Elementary, Island Village Montessori, Student Leadership Academy, Pineview, Venice High School, and Suncoast Polytech. And my point is that it's not one size fits all. I've made arrangements to have all of my kids be in the best place that's possible for them. And I think that the funding for all of them should be the same. And we've gone in and out of public and charter schools. I think they should be treated the same as well. And basically that's kind of what I wanted to say, because it's not just one here, one there. They're going in and out. Currently, I have 2 at Student Leadership Academy, and I also have 2 at Venice High School. And one of them is doing dual enrollment, so he's at, the community college. So I think it is important that you know that our kids are, my kids at least, are all treated the same, and they fit wherever they can possibly do the best.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Last card I have is Jeffrey Buck.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. How are you all doing today? I go away for the summer. I come back. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. You got your own police force now. All kinds of stuff going on. I'd like to say I'm very satisfied with what you've done. It's good work up here, okay? It's good work. And I think charter folks are, I think when I was in the charter school, I was a little naive because you're not the same. And it's not going to be treated the same. And there's not much they can do for you. So you're just going to have to deal with it. Although I respect it and I understand where you're coming from. I want to talk to you about a couple of quick things. One is I'm happy with the security procedures you've done so far.
Oh, wait, pardon me, excuse me. I'm sorry. Please, thank you. Sorry.
My name's Jeffrey Buck. One thing I want to talk to you about is security. Good job. Thank you very much. You're working on it. It's not an easy thing. I understand it's difficult. So let's give it a little bit of time, see it happen. 2, I think, while we're all focused in on security, the biggest issue I think you have for your kids to getting the test scores up would be the lunches you're serving them. My kid had Crazels last year, which is orange-flavored, sugar-coated raisins, okay? I'd like to work with you all at some level and try and help improve that, maybe get some people to improve that. The other thing I would like to say is, I watched the elections. I want to stay up, so I watched Ms. Ziegler's debate so much on Channel 7, and I want to be informed about it. I want to see about it. But the other guy you're going up against, he said he wants to take the politics out of politics, but the very next day, I get this card from him in the mail, and it was like a Mexican soap opera, the way it was phrased. It was just horrible. It was trying to make, it's not politics? Can't talk politics? Okay. Well, anyway,
policy with me.
I just didn't think it was good. I think you got a good thing going here, and you need to support and nurture what you have. Well, okay, that kind of cuts myself short a little bit, but I think people in Sarasota need a leader like what you have with Ms. Ziegler. Okay.
Gosh.
So good luck, and I want to work with you on the sugar-coated raisins. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And that concludes hearing of citizens. Moving on to the next item, we have any additions or corrections to the superintendent to the consent agenda.
There are no changes to the consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any comments? Seeing none, board members, please vote on the consent agenda. And the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the first item of new business. Is there a motion?
I would move that the project be accepted as complete and no, hang on a minute.
Item number 22.
Wrong one.
The CIP.
I would recommend that the school board adopt the 2018-19 5-year capital improvement plan as presented.
I have a motion.
Not as presented, as amended, as amended.
As amended. As amended. Aren't you going to amend it?
I would like to, well, we have to bring it up first, and then we have to amend it. So I'm going to second that motion.
Okay.
And then I would like to speak to it and offer an amendment.
Sure. Mrs. Brown. In a second.
I would like to move that for the 2018-2019 school year, we allocate capital funds in the amount of $250 per unweighted full-time equivalent to all of our charter schools in Sarasota County for all their students. And we're not going to make the determination whether they're living in Sarasota County or elsewhere. We're just going to go across the board for $250 per student. And I think some of our, well, I'll just make that motion. I think it comes to about $1.6 million, and we've seen that the $25 million that we had allocated for security, we're going to be coming in under that. I think about $3 to $4 million under that, so we'll be able to take it from the $25 million line for security and reduce that by $1.6 million to fund the $250 per student.
I need a second on the amendment.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second on the amendment. Are there any comments on the amendment? Mrs. Brown.
I'd like to comment to the earlier speakers and how we think we should be the same across the board. The capital dollars going to charter schools and capital dollars going to the traditional public schools are different, because one of the reasons is that we own those capital assets. We don't own the capital assets for the charter schools. So when improvements are made to the schools, we don't get to keep them. And we do want to work with you through the legislative session to come up to some sort of a resolution on what was done last year versus what's doing this year, or what's going to be done in the current years. But what we will do with this one is we'll bring you up to what the average was, what we were giving you, because I know that not only were you hit with reduced capital dollars this year, but you were hit with reduced operating dollars this year, as was all of us, when 47 cents per student. And you were also hit with requirements to add safety features for all of our students. And we all understand that we want to make our kids safe regardless of what school they go to in Sarasota County. If they're our students and they go to a charter school, we want to make sure they're safe. Now, you said $100,000 you had to borrow for that. This isn't going to come up to $100,000, but it'll get you very close to that. I think almost 2/3 of that. So we know, we're very much aware of how this is, and that's why the chair put this back on the agenda this morning to talk about it at the workshop, and that's why I brought it forward today. And we think this will bring you back up to your level funding. And last year was a banner year, but we didn't want to hold back on this. Will bring you on an average of what you've been for the 5-year period. So you'll be bringing that back up to about $800 per student total capital dollars.
You good? Thank you. Sorry, I didn't know if that was a conclusion. Thank you. Mrs. Goodwin.
Well, I would just like to say that, you know, in looking at Student Leadership Academy, for an example, I've had a close relationship with Vicki Marble for a number of years when she was the executive director there, and John Cooley is doing and will do a great job as the executive director. I know that there were several years ago that you all had to put a new roof on. That cost $300,000, and no, you don't own the building. And you worked something out with the lease and the lease payments. But that's the whole issue for capital dollars. And for many years, we have shared our referendum dollars, which are in their operating budget, which are teacher positions and other things. We've shared that with our charter schools, and we don't have to. we have done that because we think it's the right thing to do, and we do feel that your students are our students. In other counties, not so much. We do more and have a better relationship, I think, with our charter schools than probably any other county in the state. And that's reflected in the sharing equally of the referendum dollars, but then we were sharing 30% of our capital dollars until the state got involved. And last year, you had a banner year, and that was based on, I think, about $1,300 per student, where you look at Lake County, and they got $75 per student, and Miami-Dade, which is a really big urban county, and they got $500. So they squawked to the legislature, and those that squawked the loudest get answered with changes in legislation, and this is why it was all averaged and changed out this year. That's really what happened. So it was taken that we would get $50 million in PICO funds, and you all would get $145 million in PICO funds statewide, which was over $500 per student for the charters, and $20 per student if you were to equate it that way, although we do not for public school students. So it's part of it is legislation. It's a good reason why we all ought to work together in a governmental affairs way this year to see what's going to happen, because it's going to change again. I can assure you it will change in the legislative session. We've got new leadership coming in. So hopefully we'll get some people from all the schools that will be involved with us. John Holcomb, I know, would love to be, right, John? And others. So at any rate, we're hoping that we can all partner together with one voice to talk to the legislature this year on those things that are equally important to us. And the two things are capital dollars, and the other thing is the required local effort, which we've had cuts in the last 3 years of $100 million in our operating budget. $4 billion statewide. That was based on holding back, not getting the growth that's happened in our county in the last 3 years. So those are some things we probably have the same dog in the hunt. So I'm hoping we can work together. Send your cards and your letters. Let them keep coming. I'm always happy to see those. And we have great partners. We have great students doing great things, high-performing things in charter schools. And we do care, and we do intend to continue working very hard for all our students.
So, thank you. Mr. Robinson?
Thank you. I just want to give a little bit of a background and piggyback on what Ms. Goodwin was talking about. So just put in perspective, of the 67 counties, 65 of them were sharing with, 2 of them were sharing with you, 65 were not. And the one that was sharing was Sumter, and they got 40% charter schools. So I really kind of don't count them. I really think that we were the only ones going out of our way to share dollars with the charter schools. And we've historically have done that. Not just that, but the referendum dollars we've shared with you. But you brought up the 3-year average. That's how PICO dollars are handed out, the 3-year average. And if you think about it logically for a second, when we were talking about the enrollment going down, well, we get so much money per student, and so if you get it's year by year. If we get less students, you get less money. You get more students, you get more money. If your capital dollars were that same way, instead of a 3-year average, your capital dollars would go zigzag like that. And so just because you lost students, you still got to put a roof on your head. And so you would want to use some sort of averaging, smoothing process so that there isn't a ripsaw of capital dollars, because you just can't, you can reallocate a teacher, you can't reallocate a roof. And so that's the rationale behind doing a 3-year average. But that's a state thing, not us. But taking the 3-year average to the logical conclusion, I'm not going to be supporting the amendment, because what we had voted on, I think 4 times now, actually was an increase to the charter schools overall on a 3-year average. And our students, the district manager students, we got to think about every student. I agree the charter school students are important, so are the district manager students. And increasing by $250, well, our district manager students are not getting an increase of $250 per student. And so I got to look at not just what's charter schools. I got to look at the fact that Venice High has kids in the hallway or community space or, on the couch or the sectional. I have to look at all those things. I can't just look at one. And I agree, charter schools are great partners of ours. I'll be the first one to tell you, one of the main reasons why we're an A-rated district is because of the great work that's done at charter schools. And 2 years ago, probably the only reason we got an A district was because of SLA. Mm-hmm. SLA kept us, because of the civics test that they taught, kept us from being 0.4 points from being a B. And if it wasn't for SLA, we probably would have lost our A school district. So I agree, SLA is important. Charter schools are important in general, but SRA specifically saved the county, because that would have been devastating for us. It probably would have affected, how we got the referendum dollars. So I understand that the role you play and the impact you have on our students and impact you have countywide, but I have to look at things from a broader perspective, and so I'm not going to be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Mrs. Zucker.
One of the things that bothers me is the fact that during the last presentation, what I heard was that the dollars, the capital dollars, were going to be used for staffing. Capital dollars are not to be used for staffing. They are to be used for capital repairs, roofs, computers, hardening of the schools, whatever, but not for staffing. So if you're getting capital PICO dollars now and you can't use them for staffing, and yet you're using them for staffing, what happens when those dollars go down? What do you do with the staff that you have that's staffing your schools if you're depending upon the capital funds to do it? Now, I'm going to support this motion. I am, because I feel we didn't give you any warning that this is what we were going to do. But I would urge you to not depend upon the status quo, because we can't depend upon the status quo. We don't know from year to year what we're going to be allocated. And when you look at the charter schools received $150 million in PICO funds, and we received $50 million, the traditional schools. So when you spread that over the state, there's less charter schools, but they got way much more money than the traditional schools. So that's what Eric is talking about, what the 3-year rolling average, why that makes more sense. Because we don't know what you're going to get or what we're going to get next time. And also, when you look at capital funding for us, we provide transportation, and some of you will take advantage of the transportation, and some of you take advantage of our food services. But not counted in that is the buses themselves or the fuel. So we don't charge you for that stuff. That comes out of our capital, the money that's left in the school district. And you talk about food services, we have to pay for all of the ovens and refrigerators and all of that. That's not coming out of your budget. That's coming out of the school budget. So there are hidden costs in our capital budget that are not in your capital budget. So when we say it has to be a fairer way of doing this, please understand that there are other costs that you are not taking into consideration, and that perhaps we should do a better job of explaining to you, so that when we do something like this comes up, you're aware of why it's happening. Because maybe that's the problem. But I know that please do not count on the same amount of money as next year as this year, because we have no clue of what will come in next year. Thank you.
Thank you. So I rewatched our meeting from the 7th, that evening, and it was clear, even up here, but it was clear there was a lot of confusion, and certainly in the community there has been a lot of confusion, and I would echo every single thing that was said up here, because it's no secret that I'm a big advocate of school choice, and I believe that it should not be an us versus them. They are all of our students, and the more we can approach it that way, the better our community will be, and has been. And like I said, I think Jane hit it right on the nail on the head, is when you compare Sarasota to the other counties, we are light years ahead of the collaboration and support of charter schools. Doesn't make for the planning that occurred from this past year to the current year, or even before that, any less painful. But for perspective, I think it's really, really important, because I believe that as you evaluate the capital discussion, it's not an easy discussion, because we have to, as Mr. Robinson said, we have to consider every single student. It can't be charter versus district managed. It has to be the entire district, the entire, I hate the word system, but system, working together. Our financial viability impacts charter schools, and so we want to make sure we're forecasting properly and we're thinking through and we understand it. And there's no doubt there has been volatility, and we also didn't expect Parkland. None of us did, right? So we're all evaluating our capital plans in a completely different way than we were this time last year, and let's hope that's the way we don't ever have to go through that again. But I also think it's important that, when I looked at the options, and I want to add that I appreciate what finance has done, because they worked their rear ends off to bring forward different options. And I believe that the options presented to us were to illustrate different trends, but there was just confusion. And one of my biggest concerns was if there was what would have basically had already been pre-approved in the budget presentation prior to August 7th had illustrated that that's also ultimately what was what action or inaction was taken. There was really no change. But I think that it's important that one of the proposals, as I called it, is the Sarasota standard pre any state involvement, which is that there was a $2 million deficit. My concern, again, trying to forecast and prepare for the entire district, is we are making sure that we had the money to actually to support that change. And I know Dr. Bowden confirmed that this afternoon. And the other concern I had was the way some of the illustration, one of the sheets showed, it showed one school, specifically Sky Academy, almost appearing that they weren't going to get any money. And so that, from a decision-making standpoint, we don't want to single out one school. So I believe, I applaud everyone for being engaged. I love engaged citizens. I just want to make sure information out there is accurate, because it's so important, because I don't think that the decisions are lightly taken. No one's trying to cut anyone's funding. We have to balance and forecast and make sure we're protecting all of our students. I know that there was a lot of discussion about the capital improvements versus owning the facilities. I think those are really important, relevant information to take into account. I think that the 15% capital dollars versus the 15% student enrollment, it's an easy calculation, but it's an unfair way of evaluating it. We also have a number of elements that they're restricted in sharing. So I could go on, and I know I shared a lot of that information, probably more than anyone wanted when they reached out, and I tried to give them an analysis of really kind of what the decision upon us is. So I believe I'm going to support this, because I don't want, to smooth the volatility for our schools, because they are our students, is where I believe this partnership illustrates that this is something Sarasota differentiates us across the board, across the state. However, what we talked about earlier today is the concern about moving into next year, because we don't know, nor do you, and what we don't want to have is another circumstance like this. I think that there's been a great history of collaboration. We need to continue that. I hope that, I know that our Office of School Choice works, I don't know if she's in here, works really hard, and that's not just district to charter schools, that's all the school choice. There's an abundance of work that they have to do. So all that we can do to work together, I think Jane, again, Mrs. Goodwin made a great point about working together as it relates to the legislature. I think you want to talk about differentiating. If we came together and worked to the legislature, charter schools and district managed schools, no one across the state is doing it. It gives me goosebumps. Nobody's doing that, and I think that would send a very powerful message. So I hope that is something that we can look forward to doing together, because if we want to have a unified voice and really talk about these all being our students, that would be a game changer. So I will get off my pedestal now and say, and I will be supporting the amendment. So yes, we will. So I will take a roll call for the amendment on the motion ahead. So Mrs. Brown.
Yes.
Mrs. Zucker.
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
No.
And the chair votes aye, and the amendment passes 4-1. Now we are back to the original motion as amended. Yes.
I'm trying to understand, when the motion was as presented, that's what I'm trying to clarify.
No, I pulled it back. I pulled back.
But then you said as amended.
It has to be amended because of this.
Right.
Now the amendment now.
I understand that. My question is about the Venice High.
No, I know. We're going to get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
Because yep. Okay. So the amendment has passed. We're back to the initial measure. Yes. Okay. And then I have Shirley on the marker. So Mrs. Brown.
Well, on the 5-year capital plan we discussed this morning, and I think there were several of us that had concerns about a School Avenue, and it looks like we've got some money in there, but we're waiting to work with the city on that. But another area of concern was the Venice High School, and we were. Oh, there you go. I didn't push my button. Okay. An area of concern was the Venice High School, and some of us thought, well, let's just get that wing done that's up there and move that forward. But in further discussion, we realized that might cause further problems because it might overcrowd Venice High School because right now it's built for like 2,100 students, and if we add the wing for another 500 students, we would have a school for 2,600 students, but we're still going to be needing another school soon because of the West Villages and all that. And so what we've done is moved it up a year in the capital plan from what we had originally, but we're also looking at building a school, another high school down in Venice to take care of that issue that we have. But we have to comply with what Tallahassee tells us, and Tallahassee tells us we can't build a school until we already have the students. So basically the school has to be overcrowded by the amount of students that we need to build a new school for. And I think we had a direction this morning that we've told our staff to go out and be creative and come back maybe with some other ideas on what we might do. So at our next workshop, we are going to be looking at Venice High School, adding another school, or using that classroom wing, and which is the best outcome in the long run for what we have to do. But for right now, we've just moved it up 1 year in the plan from what was originally presented.
I second that.
Was that a motion? No, that was not a motion.
Then can I make a motion that we move Venice High up 1 year?
Oh, okay.
It's more than that.
May I, for point of clarification?
The whole thing.
Oh, I guess we do have to amend it. This amendment too.
If I can just give it 1 second, Dr. Bowden, I know that we had a presented CIP, and it has been amended since our workshop to include the Venice High School wing. Am I correct? No.
No. What do we know?
Okay, so
let's hand it over
yes,
to Dr. Bowden.
Yes, there's been one amendment to the 5-year capital plan as presented. I believe you are contemplating now a second amendment to the 5-year capital plan. I believe the appropriate motion would be to move the classroom wing at Venice High School to the 2020-21 and the 2021-22 school year.
So moved.
I'll second that.
I'm still on deck.
Now that you have a motion and a second, I do believe it would be appropriate to call Ms. Ebal forward to talk about how she can accomplish that as a point of discussion.
Perfect. Mrs. Zucker, did you want to speak now, or you want to wait?
Game to get to.
No, I want to speak now.
Okay, Mrs. Zucker, but
what I want to speak about is the fact that the reason that we can't put a portable on the high school, on the campus of Venice High School, is if you put a portable on there, that is considered permanent capacity.
Unless we lease it.
Unless we lease it, because that means that you then can't build a school because you're not over capacity if you have a permanent portable on the school. There are all of these rules that impede us, not charter schools, but impede the traditional public schools from being able to put up a building when we need one, or to make additions and add on to it. Everything comes out of Tallahassee, where you all don't have that problem that are in the charter schools. You could just put them up. You just got to get the money. So I want you to know that it's more complicated than what you think. Kathy.
Mrs. Eba.
Good afternoon.
Hello. Thank you for.
So how'd your homework work out?
My homework, our homework worked out just like you promised, Mr. Robinson.
Yeah.
See, Dr. Bowden asks for it to happen, and it happened. So at this morning's workshop, we did discuss the challenges that we are experiencing in the Venice area on growth on all schools, but specifically at Venice High School. And we talked about how we have a meeting scheduled with the principals at West Villages in November after the 40-day count, because we want to see exactly how much growth resulted in students this year. They didn't have a lot of building last year, so we want to see this year's numbers. and we won't get those till we get the final 40-day counts in October. We also talked about the Venice High School has a current capacity of about 1,900. If you add a 400-student station wing, you're going to bring that to about 2,400. Is that what you want Venice High School to be? So given all of that, we went back and did some homework. We moved for this purpose of planning. Remember, in your capital improvement plan, year one is the only funded year. So year one is the real year. So we look, when we address years 2 through 5, those are planning years. Those are years for us to start thinking about what needs to happen. They give us time to work with the state to get the permission that we need to construct the buildings we want, i.e. the Pineview classroom wing, and decide what really should happen. So by moving up the classroom wing at Venice High School into the 3-4 year rather than the 4-5 year as originally presented today, you are signaling to the Venice community that we recognize that there is a growth demand that is happening in the community, but it gives us time to thoroughly evaluate our options, work with the West Villages community to determine when and if, how quickly, and as you explained, Mrs. Brown, the potential of doing something creatively to help build a campus there, without committing ourselves to building something right now. So what we did in this budget is the capital dollar. This budget is a summary of many different funds. We took the fund that we had allocated the wing for Venice High School in the year 4-5. We moved it to the year 3-4. It balanced out. And we're presenting this to you as a draft, recognizing that you have asked us to do further homework and start a discussion at next board workshop in September about how to deal with capacity needs across the district and looking at our schools.
I just want to go on record because now that's 2 comments that we're going to bring back recommendations in September, and I'm just not sure I want to make that commitment as we sit here. We want some time to be creative. We want to have our meeting down at the West Villages, so I think it would be more appropriate for us to say that we would return to a workshop by year end with some options for Venice High School, but to do it in September, I don't believe is going to give us enough time to clearly survey the landscape and bring you all of the available options.
Mr. Robinson?
I would strongly suggest that you also reach out to the Venice community and the Northport community, because these decisions are going to affect the boundaries of Venice High, and there are people who in Venice, don't want to go anywhere else. And so building a school in West Village obviously impacts West Village, but the decision about whether to build a ring in Venice or not affects Venice too. And so hopefully that the discussion, the community discussion, won't just be centered around West Villages, that you also include people in Northport and people in Venice, because if not, they're going to be coming to me and Jane and having that discussion whether we want it or not. So I prefer that you can vet some of those things before they come to me and Jane.
From a process perspective, is I think it's incumbent on staff to identify all of the available options, for the board to say these are the options that we're interested in pursuing, and then to go out and seek public comment. So we may bring you 5, 6, 7 options, at which you say, let's take 3 or 4 out for public comment. And so certainly there would be no expectation in November, December that the board would take action, but just give direction to staff of continue down this path and no way, no how, and start to hone down those options.
I just want you to recognize the stakeholders.
Absolutely.
is a very large group.
Yes.
That's all.
Mrs. Brown?
Robinson is part of our, just so you know, as part of our interlocal on school site planning and school construction, it is a requirement of the school board to involve the community before we commit to.
You were engaged at Venice. I have no doubt about that.
Well,
it's a regular process.
we not only do you have to believe it, it's in our interlocal, we have to do it.
Mrs. Brown?
I would like to suggest that we perhaps even look at having our workshop down there, because we try to have at least one down there every year, and since we've got an issue that is really going to affect them, that we look at moving the workshop and, of course, the board meeting down there to Venice, or for when we have this discussion.
Mrs. Zucker?
I would like to reiterate what we said this morning, that
Mike.
There's not very much land available at Venice campus. It looks like there's a lot of land there, but there isn't. There isn't even sufficient land might not be sufficient land for us to put a portable there.
That's not true. We have scheduled for this year, in order to deal with the capacity needs of the campus today, we will be adding three portables to the campus this
What was
year.
the conversation this morning then about not having, who was it? Joe?
Jody mentioned that there is limited ability for us to put portables in good locations, but there is space for us to put portables, and we do intend in the next 2 months to lease portables, because you were right when you made the comment that if it's a purchase portable, it becomes a part of our permanent capacity. But lease 3 portables and put them at Venice High School in order to deal with current deficiencies in school capacity.
Okay.
Dr. Bowden.
One of the unique things about Venice High School is we have master planned the campus to allow for this classroom wing. And so my direction to staff is, don't put a portable in the footprint of the building that would have to be moved if we decided to build the building. So it starts to eat up space in that regard, is you don't want to place a portable there and in 2 years have to move the portable because it's sitting on the site of a classroom wing if you decide to go that route. So
that costs money.
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin.
Well, I just wanted to say that I think having a session there and having a workshop about this there would be a really good thing. Mrs. Brown, I agree with that. And I think we want to have as many facts in front of us as we possibly can when we do that. By that time, we'll have a good idea of what our true enrollment is. We'll have an idea of, where the gaps are and some of the labs and other things that Venice is so concerned about right now, which appears to be a big thing. They have so many more advanced placement courses now than they did when they planned for that building, that's one of the shortcomings that they have. And I think, that those things are important. I've spent a good bit of time in the West Villages this summer, along with some other new planned communities in South County. And I always ask the question, how many of you have neighbors with younger children? And very, very few people raise their hands. But I do think that there is a lot of press and marketing that is happening now relative to the Braves coming. And as that date approaches, I think there will be more and more young families moving into the area. So I think it's just a matter of time.
Thank you. Mrs. Eba, I want to say thank you for, one, quickly amending this, but I think today's discussion was very helpful. I know it wasn't necessarily on the workshop for that, but we brought up something that I think was absolutely necessary to address and confirm. So I'm pleased that we were able to do that. I think that it's important to note that, and I think Mr. Robinson touched upon it, I know that as a regular process, we do include stakeholders and input in the various scenarios. I've saw it with STC. But just for the public standpoint, anytime we talk about potential rezoning or anything like that, I know it causes angst, but this is nothing immediate. This is an evaluation process. This is forecasting, kind of going back to what we were talking about, preparing for the unknown. So I really appreciate your work. I know we had a light into a planner's life this morning in the workshop. So I'll be supporting this. Were there any additional comments on the amendment?
Can I make one comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because I want to make it clear that the draft that you approved and asked us to move forward with in June has one other change to this document, and I want to make sure that it's understood what that change is. I think it was briefly mentioned, but there is a $3 million addition to this budget for Sarasota High School. We worked extensively with the community in May and June, and we'll continue to work with them as we move forward to fund a west side of the campus bike pedestrian walkway and other improvements as required by the city of Sarasota based on a traffic study that we did of the impacts of closing School Avenue, the segment that goes through Sarasota High School. So that $3 million will pay for the improvements that are required by the city, as well as pay for the pathway that we worked out with the community as an agreement of getting them to sign off on or maybe not sign off is the right word,
Open-minded?
Yeah, open-minded, that's right. For moving forward.
Entertained, that's
with
right.
the closure of School Avenue, which we are currently have an application with the city of Sarasota. I just want to make a note for those who've been following this process that that is a new item to this capital improvement plan that they had not seen before.
And for clarification, that was actually on the presented attached version. The 2 amendments were not. So, but yes, thank you for highlighting that change. So on the, I'm sorry? So we do need to take a voice vote on the amendments. So I'll start with Mrs. Brown.
Yes.
Mrs. Zucker.
We're voting for the
Venice.
Just for Venice.
I think for the record, you might want to refer to it as the Second Amendment.
Second Amendment.
Yes.
Okay, so the Second Amendment on the CIP, and Mrs. Brown.
Yes.
Mrs. Zucker.
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, and the Second Amendment passes